Excellent. Well, good evening to all of our participants. It's an absolute honor. Usually, for many of you who've been here, you know that I usually don't get the evening started, but tonight I have the honor of having Dr. Sachdeva as our panelist for this fireside chat. We've been waiting for this for a while. I had asked Dr. Sachdeva a while ago, and I am really honored tonight to be having this conversation with Sach. I think Dr. Sachdeva doesn't need any introduction, but as many of you know, he's the Senior Vice President for Education at the American College of Surgeons, and he's the founding director of the American College of Surgeons Division of Education. But before we jump in, I'm going to ask Caroline if we could have the slides, just go through some housekeeping. Please, if you want to put your questions, thank you to all who had sent us questions. And if you want to put your questions in the chat, please feel free to do so. I'm going to try to weave the questions into our conversation tonight. Next, just for everyone to know, we are very proud of the collection that we've now created of these fireside chats and virtual grand rounds on the Academy of Master Surgeon Educators website. Please feel free to go and take a look at them and watch many of the previous recordings, and there will be a recording of tonight's program. Finally, the fireside chats, we have two great fireside chats with Dr. Healy on October 16th and Dr. Levin on December 8th. So I invite you to come back, and we also have a virtual grand rounds in November. Thank you so much, Caroline. Well, welcome to everyone. I see 73 attendees, and welcome you all. Sach, it is such an honor to be having this conversation with you. I think many people who are participating tonight, myself included, owe a lot to you as far as their surgical education career. And so really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Mo. It's an honor and a real privilege to be chatting with you in this forum. I've often seen you in action in these sessions, and I've admired the way you have run these sessions, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So, you know, Sach, I think many people have known you as the educator that you are and the face of the American College of Surgeons and the Division of Education. But as we were preparing last evening, I was really thrilled to talk a little bit about your past and how you became interested in surgery. And I would like to start, chronologically early in your life. And we talked a little bit about the influence of your parents and the influence that they had, and just wanted to maybe start there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shabahang. It may come as a surprise to several people on this call to know that I decided to become a surgeon at the age of 9. I was at home before I joined a boarding school a couple of years later for my high school education. And my dad was called to do an appendectomy on a Saturday night. And I insisted on going with him to watch him operate because I'd heard so much about his stories sitting at home when he was done in his day's work to share various things with us as a family. And I went into the OR. My dad was a military surgeon, and at that time he was a surgeon in a small military hospital in India, and he got the permission from the commanding officer to allow me to come and stand on one side. So I was put up on 3 stools. I remember so distinctly in greens that were much too big for me. So there were a million safety pins that were used to make sure that I didn't trip and fall. And I was put on these 3 stools, and I absolutely was amazed with the choreography, with the collaboration, with the camaraderie, and the singular purpose of the operating room team. And as soon as I got done, he got done, and I got done, we got home. I told my mom, I want to be a surgeon. And right through high school in a boarding school environment. I went to a British-oriented boarding school that was built and that really worked on the pattern of Eton in the UK. Um, I had a singular purpose in my career, and that was to be a surgeon. So I went into medical school wanting to be a surgeon, and here I am. I did not know at that time that I'd be a surgeon educator. That came a little bit later in my life.
Um, we talked a little bit about your father as a surgeon, his role in the military. Um, one of the things that you shared with me was that he played a larger role in your life than maybe you were willing to admit to yourself or maybe admitted. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. My dad trained in surgery in the UK, then went back to India and became a military surgeon. He was a career military surgeon, and he rose up the ranks and he retired as a three-star general in charge of all surgical services for the Indian Armed Forces. And I saw him first very closely when I was at home, and then somewhat at a distance when I was in boarding school and in college. And I watched his grit, his resilience, his purpose in life, his precision, and I picked up some of those traits just watching him and admiring him. My mom, on the other hand, was a homemaker. She was a college grad, but didn't pursue any further degrees. She used to do oil paintings, and she also was a musician. She used to play the violin, and she was into the arts, and she was very kind and gentle, and very, very graceful in everything she did. However, despite being so kind and gentle, she also was resolute, which is what I admired. So you can be kind and gentle and yet be resolute in your purpose and what you're doing in life. So I picked up a lot of those traits. They are still very near and dear to me in my heart, and they have really been the basis of who I am in many ways and my qualities and what I try and emulate almost daily.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And in one of the things that it was interesting as I've been preparing for this and we were talking, I had never thought to myself through all the years that I've known you, where did Sach go to medical school? And when we were talking about your journey and your education, can you share with us a little bit about your education in India? And how that all came about and what your thoughts were at that time as far as your career.
Sure. Um, I went to a boarding school, as I mentioned. When I graduated from high school, I went to do my pre-medical degree from the University of Bombay. It was a very well-known college within the University of Bombay. And then I got admission to a medical school in Bombay. And uh, after that, I applied for the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, which was the premier medical school in the country at that time, very competitive. And the admissions to that medical school occurred in September, whereas all the other medical schools occurred in June. So there was a little gap there, and that was by design because they took the best people from across the country into the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. And so I had to go through, I had to have the grades. I went through the usual selection process there. There were over 5,000 people who applied for 35 slots. Yes, 35 slots in a class. And 70 of us were called to New Delhi to be interviewed. 35 were selected, and our class size was 50. The other 15 seats were reserved, 10 for the underprivileged folk who required some special help, and 5 for international people, children of individuals from embassies and so on. So we had a very rich educational experience, in addition to being very rigorous in our teaching and our clinical work that we were experiencing, we also learn from each other because of that small class size, cohesiveness, and the variety of people that were in our small class. And most of the people from our school, medical school, came to the US, some went to the UK. And when I was thinking about my further education, my dad wanted me to go to the UK as he had trained in the UK. I looked at the training programs of both the UK and US, and I thought the US programs were uh, more in line with what I was looking for in terms of my training. And I took the ECFMG exam, and then I applied through the match. Yes, the national matching program, and I was matched to the Medical College of Pennsylvania. And the chair wrote to me and said, look, we don't accept anyone without a personal interview, but the vice chair was going to be visiting India on vacation. So he told me if I was truly interested, I should go and interview with him when he was vacationing. So I drove about 4 hours north of New Delhi in the foothills of the Himalayas, got interviewed by him, and they matched me or ranked me high enough that I got matched into that program.
That is fascinating. So you interviewed in India, matched into Medical College of Pennsylvania. At that time, were you still thinking surgery is obviously you were matching into a surgical program? So that idea from age 9 never changed.
No, it didn't. And I wanted to be a surgeon from that point on. And when I came, of course, into the surgical program, I was thrilled because I was going to get trained as a surgeon. And I went through the traditional training program, and education really came about at the end of my residency, where I started thinking about surgical education. But clearly, I wanted to become the best clinician I could be and the best provider I could ever imagine.
I'm interested. So what form did that interest in surgical education take at the end of your residency?
That's a great question. I finished my training in 1980 and went through the boards, etc. And I was offered a position on the faculty of the Medical College of Pennsylvania after I finished. So I stayed on and I started a little lab at the VA hospital. The VA was affiliated with us and with the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, now called the
Mhm.
Pullman School. And I started a little lab there, but it was a very traditional academic surgeon. And this was 1980. 1983, the clerkship director left to take up a chairmanship at another location. So the chair called me into his office and said, would you run the surgery clerkship? And of course, I said yes. But the next day, I went back to him and I said, could you tell me why you selected me of all the faculty? I had this funny feeling that I was the junior most faculty member, so that's why I got that privilege. But I wanted to hear from him. And he didn't say that I was the junior most person. He said that he selected me because I was an educator. So I looked at him and I said, an educator? He said, yes, you got 2 Golden Apple Awards from the medical students for teaching.
Wow.
That was my credential. And and truthfully, I got those golden apples because I love to teach, because I wanted to learn to sit for my boards and do other things. So it was great. So I became a clerkship director, and that's where the rubber hit the road. I realized how much I had to pick up and learn. And I joined the Association for Surgical Education in 1983, which was my first meeting in Seattle, which was an eye-opening experience. And I found my kindred spirits and my friends and colleagues who were facing the same issues as I was, and I immediately bonded with them in 1983. And of course, I put myself on a fast track to learn. So I went to the AAMC courses, the National Board of Medical Examiners courses, other courses in education, hardcore education, while I was rising up the ranks in the Association for Surgical Education. And also the dean sent me to the Harvard Macy course. So I was in the Harvard Macy program, and that was a life-changing experience. I spent a week in Boston with some of the best brains in education, and then we continued to stay in touch, do things, and it was a year-long endeavor. And even now, the Harvard Macy folk have a
Mhm.
reception every year, and it is so special to me because it made a huge difference, and I learned a lot.
So, Sach, this is fascinating. So, you graduated in 1980. You're not necessarily thinking that this is my career as a surgical educator. Happens to be that you become clerkship director. We talked about the fact that you were in the second cohort of members of the Association for Surgical Education. And really, from that point on, you educated yourself in multiple ways to become the surgical educator that you became as time went by.
Yes, and I also took advantage of opportunities. For example, OSCEs were coming into the world at that time. And I went to Ottawa, the University of Ottawa, where there was a guy by the name of Ian Hart, who was a protege of Ronald Harden in Scotland, who started OSCEs. And
Mhm.
Ian used to have a 2 week course on OSCEs in Ottawa. So I went and spent some time. I spent just over a week with him and learned how to do OSCEs. And I came back, and lo and behold, I got suddenly anointed by the Association for Surgical Education to be the OSCE expert. And I was invited to write a book chapter. And I partnered with Robert Cohen, who was a PhD from the University of Toronto, and we wrote a book chapter for the manual on assessment and evaluation of the ASE at that time on OSCEs. And that bore me in good stead because that set the stage for me to do research at the resident level using OSCEs for our entering residents, a paper I presented to the Society of University Surgeons, and that is what got me into the SUS. I was the second person to be admitted to the Society of University Surgeons exclusively on educational credentials, not as an adjunct to something else, because of my scholarly work in education.
Because at that time, the SUS did much of the surgical community didn't see education as a scholarly pathway.
Absolutely. There was no pathway. In fact, when I got down this track, my department chair also told me, he said, you're going down a path that you love, but let me tell you, there is no future for education in an academic environment. And I told him that's what I wanted to do, and that's what we would pursue together. Him and I would take over the educational programs, and I would work with him to take our education programs to the next level and also work nationally on various things.
So, Sach, I want to just pause at this moment because you've talked about, and as many of our speakers have talked about serendipity and, opportunities that come forward. And it's always a question of how much is it the opportunity and the timing, and what is it that one does to take advantage of those situations? As you reflect on, I'm sure this and many other points in life where serendipity came into the picture, what would you offer as a lesson to many of us about that? What was it that you took away from it afterwards, as these opportunities came and clashed with timing and so on?
Yeah, the first thing is with serendipity, if one has an opportunity, the first thing is one needs to figure out whether that is in alignment with one's passion and interest.
Mhm.
I've always felt that yes, everyone can do a great job, but to do the best job, to be the best of the best, you have to have passion. It comes from
Mhm.
within, and the drive to reach that level of excellence and expertise. So, some of the opportunities that came my way, I wanted to be sure they were aligned with my passion and what I wanted to do in life and in my career. So that's the first lesson I would convey to people who are thinking about serendipity and how to take advantage of it. Second is once you decide on that path, to do the best, and to work as hard as you can and not to let anything deter you. There will be disappointments, there will be problems, there'll be issues, they are part of life, but you have to remain steadfast in your vision and have that as your singular focus. And I did that in terms of the educational piece of my work, the scholarly work, some of the things I did at the school level. I was chair of the curriculum committee, I became associate dean, etc. All that happened. And at the same time, I wanted to be sure I didn't lose my clinical piece that I was trained in. And that was my life. So I kept my clinical work up. I became chief of surgery at the Philadelphia VA, a big tertiary care medical center affiliated with our school and the University of Pennsylvania. And I was the first chief of surgery there and the last from the Medical College of Pennsylvania background. And I had 8 section heads from the University of Pennsylvania. And I was head of that clinical department for 10 years. And that was a great experience. One of the things I always tell people who finish surgical training and want to go into other fields beyond clinical work, whether it is public health, whether it is global health, whether it's education, health services research, that you have to have a grounding of at least 10 years of clinical practice that is really intense, where you're immersed, where you're responsible for things, for credibility and for the experience. Mm-hmm. And even after I left the VA hospital to come back to the medical school and the university on an endowed professorship for medical and health sciences education at the university level, this is just before I joined the college here. Yes. I kept up some of my clinical work. I wasn't as busy as I was at the peak at the VA, but I kept up my clinical work. I had private patients. And when I came to Chicago, as part of my arrangement with the college, I insisted that I be allowed 1 day a week to go to a local hospital to do clinical work. And I went to the Hines VA, where I used to go every Tuesday to provide clinical care. And of course, I couldn't do major surgery and then get on a plane the next day and come back 4 days later. So I did ambulatory work, and I taught the residents and medical students from Loyola, and it was a fantastic experience. I joined the college in 2001 to start the Division of Education, as you pointed out, and I was clinically active through the end of 2019, where I used to go 1 day a week to the Hines VA to do clinical work and teach the residents and medical students.
And as we were talking about that, I will say that surprised me. I didn't realize you had remained clinically active till just 6 years ago, which is pretty recent in the big picture. I wanted to ask you, just as you brought up the VA, clearly the VA, as we've talked about, it was an important part of your career and meant a lot to you. And I just, wanted to ask, what other significance did that have, aside from a place that obviously was, a leadership role and so on, but was there anything else that made the VA special for you?
Sure. The one thing I've always told people is that the VA is the best training ground for faculty to learn at an early age how to manage things, how to run departments, how to work with faculty. And I had this unique experience because I had faculty from 2 schools that were very different, which I had to manage. In addition to that, it gave me the opportunity to mentor other faculty members in that environment, because again, providing them the opportunity to grow. It was great for the medical students and residents in terms of education and training. But one of the things that is little known is, again, talking about serendipity, as soon as I joined the VA as chief, I asked for the demographics of our patients. And I realized that we had very few women veterans coming to the VA hospital. And then I asked the front office data crunchers to tell me how many women veterans there were in the area, the Southeast Pennsylvania area going to New Jersey, north of Delaware. All that was our catchment area, and into even some places in North Jersey as well. And I said, how many women veterans are there? And there were umpteen more women veterans than they were coming to us. So then I approached some of the women veterans and asked them why they didn't come. We had little focus groups with the permission of our front office. And they said, well, it's a male dominated institution. So
Hmm.
uh, I convinced the director and the regional director, as the person was called in charge of the whole of that area, Pennsylvania and some of the other states around, to give me some funding to start the very first program for women veterans. We recruited a part-time OB-GYN. We recruited surgeons who could do breast surgery. Now, because we needed that, I got a nurse practitioner to run the program, and we captured some wards and made them exclusively for women. And that was
Wow.
the very first program for women veterans in the country in a tertiary care environment. And I was very fortunate to be recognized with an award that I got, a gold medal in the Government Excellence Award program with our team for creating that Women Veterans Program. And I'm so delighted that was possible because that really changed not only the character of our patient mix, but most importantly, provided care to women veterans who had served our country so well.
And such that it was, did that at that point, that other throughout the VA system, was that something that was adopted in other VA systems
Yes,
throughout the country?
yeah. They picked up that model, and bits of that model were adopted across the country.
Excellent, excellent. I want to, because I know once we get into the years in the college, it may take us away. I know you're very proud of two daughters who are surgeons, and I just wanted um, to ask you about your daughters and what that means to you that that they have followed to some extent in your footsteps.
Thanks for asking, Mo. They are so special and near and dear to my heart, and that's true of all of us who have children.
Mhm.
And I feel truly blessed with the two of them. And they're both surgeon scientists. They both got MD, PhDs, and the older one is a retina surgeon at Hopkins, and the younger one is a thoracic surgeon at the MGH. And I'm so happy with their successes. And I've got to tell you, I wish I could claim credit for having steered them in that direction. I was out of the house so much, and that's something that if I had to relive my life, I would love to have spent more time with them. Although I was there for their major events, my wife is the one who is a retired pathologist now, who really steered them and really pointed them in the right direction. And I was there in the shadows, and I'm glad that they didn't feel somewhat uneasy seeing my hours that I was spending. They still went into the surgical field, and that is the biggest blessing of all at the end of the day.
And if I may share, you shared that you just found out this morning that one of your daughters is presenting at the clinical congress.
Yes, she was inducted as a fellow of the college 2 years ago, and I didn't even know she was presenting at our meeting. There's a forum session, there's a panel, and she just called me over the weekend. She said, Dad, I'll see you in Chicago. I said, are you coming to the Congress? She said, yes, I have two things on the program. So she is very modest. She doesn't keep me in the loop all the time, but I'm so delighted, and I'm going to rearrange my schedule a little so I can attend at least one of the two
Excellent.
sessions and be there in the audience.
Excellent. So, Sach, I'm sure many of our participants tonight, and obviously anyone who knows you identifies you with the college. I want to go into the college years. You mentioned that 2001 was when you started the division. You were the founding chair of the division. Tell us a little bit about how that came about and what that meant to you, and what did it feel like to go into this, what may have been unknown at that time?
It was an unknown territory. I had been involved with the college like all members of the college. I was also a governor of the college for 5 years. I didn't complete my sixth year because I joined the college on staff, so I had to step
Hmm.
aside from the governor's role. So I knew about the college, but honestly, unless you are at the college looking at things from within, even the clinical congress, attending the clinical congress, even as a governor, I didn't realize how many moving parts there are and how complicated it is beneath the surface. And the college, of course, is a wonderful organization and is the largest and the best known surgical organization in the world. And when I was recruited, at that time, I was also being recruited to the University of Pennsylvania in a similar role that I had at the Medical College of Pennsylvania. And I had these two choices because I was made an offer by the University of Pennsylvania. And of course, I was made the offer from the college by Jim Carrico, who was the chair of the Board of Regents at that time, very well known trauma surgeon, and Tom Russell, who was then the executive director. And I took the college's uh, opportunity, having talked with a few people who I respected and admired, and they all encouraged me to take this one. And uh, I took it primarily because there was no script. I had a job description that was like a paragraph long, which very honestly I have to create because I was invited by Tom Russell to be part of a 20-member group to envision what a division of education might look like. Little did I
Hmm.
know I was writing my own script. Had I known, I would have made the job description one line, not a paragraph, but it was a paragraph, and the rest of it was a blank slate. So uh, basically, at that time, the only thing the regents wanted me to do was to make sure that the forum at the clinical congress was taken to the next level because the attendance there was dropping, which we've done over the years, to redo a little bit about the clinical congress program and its activities, to make some changes in CSAP, which we did. And the Surgeons as Educators course was the third program that was part of our division. And I knew about that because along with four other people, had started that program before I joined the college. So that was the portfolio that I inherited. And the other thing the regents were very interested in were the six core competencies
Hmm.
because they were just coming into the world. This is circa 2001, 2002. They were defined in 1999, 2000. They were just coming to the world, and they wanted the college to get involved with them. So the first thing we did was uh, to appoint four task forces, each headed by a regent, for the four competencies beyond knowledge and patient care, including operative skills, because those were the four that were relatively unknown to the surgical world.
Yes, sir.
And getting the regents involved was a huge step in the right direction because people bought into the concept of a new education paradigm and bought into the concept that yes, education needed to be supported because education cannot be a profit center on all fronts. It has to be supported through the appropriate resources. And that helped us grow. And then we added innovative programs. And one of the ones that we added pretty early on was the Accredited Education Institute program, which, among all the other programs of our division, is very close to my heart because when I came to the college, the sim centers were just coming into the world because of the MIS movement. There had been a
Hmm.
disaster or two, or more than two, with bile ducts getting cut and all because people were inadequately trained before they embraced laparoscopic cholecystectomies. So these centers came out funded by one of two uh, concerns, industry houses that were funding these programs. And because of that, I thought the profession should embrace this. So I took a proposal to the regents, and actually I'd had a dialogue about this even during my recruitment, that we needed to set up a program of this type to set standards for simulation centers. And
Hmm.
that was the beginning of the AEI program, I recruited Dr. Pellegrini, who was a regent at that time, to work with me hand in hand, and we created the AEI program. And right now we have 95 AEIs that are accredited by us, 2 levels across the world, and it has been a very gratifying experience and a great community. So that was part of that growth. And then some of the stuff happened by serendipity, like the entering resident readiness assessment. I'd seen the key features approach described in the literature, so I invited George Bordage to have lunch with me, and I invited Dr. Patrice Blair, who is on this call, my right-hand person, to join us, and we talked to him about it, but we didn't know how to bring it to life. And then a couple of years later, we created this program called ERA, and now since it was launched in 2018, we have more than 6,000 residents who have gone through that program. Then we added the Surgeons as Leaders course to that, redid the CSAP every 3 years as we went forward, got accredited with commendation 2 cycles for 12 years by the FSACME, and all kinds of very exciting things started happening. We recruited an engineer to help us with the ergonomic side of things and to develop new simulators. And then, of course, came the academy, which was something that actually has its roots in the Association for Surgical Education.
How so? Please
When
elaborate.
I finished my presidency in 1993, I was asked to head a national task force to create this model to recognize and reward surgeon educators and surgeon teachers. So I worked with several people known to all of you, but I'll mention 2 names of people who are very familiar to people on this call, Dr. Lee Neumeyer and Dr. Ken Schock. They were on that committee, and we created this 4-tier model of teacher, master teacher, educator, master educator, like a pyramid, with a gap between master teacher and educator, because that's a big jump towards people whose careers are focused on surgical education. And that is the model that has been the basis of our academy. I took it to the Board of Regents in 2014 as a concept with that article attached. That article was published in the December 1999 issue of Academic Medicine, and they enthusiastically embraced that. And then after that, I approached Dr. L.D. Britt, asked him whether he would partner with me to create this. We got a steering committee together, and the rest is history, including some of these sessions that have been moderated by you.
And so it's really interesting. So that pyramid was really the concept that the teacher, master teacher, educator, master educator was the concept that you all had in mind as you started the academy. Really was it started with the thought process that it was an offshoot of the Division of Education? How did you as you were conceiving it, how did you see the relationship to the Division of Education of the American College?
A great question. We wanted it to be part of the division. We weren't looking to break away, and we wanted to also have that as part of the college. That's why we built in the requirement that you have to be a member of the college, either domestic, international, or honorary, to even apply for either member or associate member category. That's a requirement. So we are part of the college. In fact, some people have applied for membership in the college so that they could apply for membership in the academy. So it has fueled that. Also, if you look at the logo, the Division of Education is right in the logo, because we wanted to be sure there wasn't misperception that we were trying to break away and create our own structure. It is part of the Division of Education, but a very unique entity unto itself to recognize and reward surgeon educators. We needed that framework. And I must confess that, as you know so well as an educator, all of education that is scholarly or impactful has to be anchored to a framework, conceptual framework. This is our conceptual framework for the academy. And then on top of that, we used the Boyer model of scholarship to assess people at those four levels of accomplishment.
Excellent. Thank you for that clarification. I'm sure that's most probably educational for everyone who's attending tonight. Sach, as you look, it's 24 years with the college in this role, if I'm doing my math right. As you think about you writing your legacy, you've mentioned the AEI program, you've mentioned the academy, you've mentioned some of the other programs. What would the headline be in the legacy that if you were writing your own legacy from the 24 years?
If I was writing something about my time here, it is 24 years, as you have mentioned. What I want to be remembered for is the people I was successful in recruiting and retaining.
Mhm.
Programs are important. They are critical. That's what is the fuel for the engine. But the engine cannot run without people. And I've had the good fortune and the real blessing of working with some of the best professionals in the world. They make my day. Every time I come to work, I get more energized. They toss ideas out. And we've been very fortunate in being able to recruit some of the best people, professionals from all different backgrounds into the division. And some of them actually decided to retire before I am planning to retire. They retired over the last 2 or 3 years, having worked with me for 20 plus years. And some are still with us beyond the 20 years. And there are some new people who've been brought in who are very bright, very forward thinking, very energetic. And the baton keeps getting passed on, and we continue to be dynamic, vibrant, and successful.
As you think about, and thank you for that, as you think about your leadership roles throughout your career, and we always ask this, I'd love to know what would some of the top pieces of advice be that you would give to young leaders or experienced leaders that maybe you didn't know 30 years ago?
Sure. In terms of guidance, I mentioned earlier that you have to be a clinician first, as a surgeon, to add on the education piece. Then you have to have some formal or informal education in education to understand the language, to look at the frameworks, to really anchor what you're doing to establish the educational frameworks for them to work. The third is that we really need to look at leadership in a different way. Now, oftentimes, all my life, I've heard that surgeons are born leaders because they lead in all different frames of reference. That is true. We lead in the OR, we lead in the ambulatory units, we lead on the wards, floors, etc. But really, leadership is something beyond that. And one of the things our surgeons as leaders course does is to separate out clinical leadership a little bit from administrative leadership. There are differences there. You cannot use the same style that you use in the OR in a boardroom. You'll get kicked out by your peers. But if you use the same style in a way, it's a different style. But regardless of anything, the common theme across all areas is you have to be authentic, you have to be driven, you have to be passionate, and most of all, you have to have integrity. Integrity, I think, is the core attribute of good leadership. You have to be believable and you have to do what you say you're going to do. You don't need any written documents. You don't need anything. You have to believe in what you are saying. If you make a promise, you deliver on that promise. So those are some of the fundamental qualities. Then beyond that come the other sophisticated areas of leadership. For example, I do believe in what Collins wrote in the Harvard Business Reviews, that it is the yin yang of fierce resolve with humility. So you have to be humble, and yet you have
Right.
to have the resolve. You have to be firm, and yet you have to be empathetic and kind. All those values, which are contrasting, have to be part of us. We have to learn how to manage conflict, how to encourage the next generation. We are here on stage for a limited period of time,
Mhm.
and our biggest legacy is who follows us and what we have done for them. We've learned that in the clinical arena through training residents and fellows over the years. In education and leadership, we need to train and mentor the next generation of leaders who will follow us. So those are some of the things. But one of the fundamental pieces, I'll close with this in terms of your question. Uh, the message I would like to convey is there will be obstacles, there will be disappointments, there will be issues that don't work out. But as Winston Churchill said, never, 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 never give in. You have to continue the path, and that drive is what separates us as true leaders from those who are not at that level of level five leadership, as Collins has described.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for that. So I have to ask, in this long, illustrious career, were there forks in the road? I always hate the word regrets, but that maybe things that maybe if you had a chance, you would say, I would do it again. And are there any ones that you would like to share?
I don't have any regrets, honestly, because I try not to have regrets. But when
Hmm.
I look back and am introspective, I always think about what I could have done better or what I can do better right now. If I had to relive my professional career, I would do exactly what I did. The only thing I might do differently is I might have thought about education a little bit earlier on in my career. It was still pretty early, and then taken perhaps a year to do something hardcore in education, which I picked up over time, but that would have given me a little bit more of a head start. But at that time, truly, there was no real science of education, surgical education, the way we have right now. So it was not a clear path, but that is something I might have done differently. And on a personal level, if I had to do something differently, I would certainly would have liked to have spent more time with our two daughters.
Makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Um, so I'm sure many people know and many people don't that you are or have completed or are completing a Master's of Health Professions education at University of Illinois. So that is extremely inspiring. What made you do that, and what's your takeaway from that for others? Because I mean, that's pretty remarkable to be doing that. Just very curious if you would share with us any part of that.
Thanks so much. Great question. I had wanted to get some structure around what I was doing
Mhm.
and extend my knowledge even beyond what I had gathered over the years. And the University of Illinois program is a very strong program. And I did a lot of thinking, a lot of researching to figure out what program would best meet my needs. And this seemed the best one available. It's part time. I finished the coursework, which has been amazing. And a lot of times, people who've been in my class have been surgery residents who are doing a
Yes,
master's, which again is enlightening. It really brings such joy. I've learned from them along the way. I've
absolutely.
learned from the wonderful faculty. I finished all my coursework. I've done my thesis uh, um, research work. I'm just analyzing the data, and I'm going to try and finish the thesis over the next few months, and then I'll be done with it. But it has been really refreshing. And one of the things that I keep telling myself is that if I share with people that you need to be a lifelong learner, you have to demonstrate that in action. So I do consider myself a lifelong learner, and it has been a wonderful experience. It has been absolutely fabulous. And I would encourage everyone who is on this call at any stage of your life, if you want to do an education degree, go for it because it really is eye opening and I've learned a lot.
That's excellent. That really is inspirational. I just want to make sure that I mention this comment from Dr. Craig that just thank you for flexible endoscopy training at the Philadelphia VA early 1983. I could not have practiced in a rural hospital without it. So I wanted to make sure to bring your attention to that. I want to, there's a question about your views of AI and the future of surgical education, but maybe I'm going to ask it a little bit more generally. Obviously, you have dedicated a whole lifetime to surgical education, really, and maybe more medical education as a larger entity. Where do you see surgical education going in the United States and maybe more internationally? What are your thoughts? And maybe I'll tie the AI piece into that question. And where do you see AI in that?
For sure. As I look at the future more, I think there is a huge opportunity to bring in more science, educational science, which is based on social sciences rather than natural sciences into our work. So I think we need to do scholarly work. We need to have end products, and those will get to be more and more evident as we go forward because the science of surgical education is really blossoming right now as we speak. Secondly, I believe that we will certainly need to bring in newer technologies, newer simulations and simulators, and AI into our mix. Uh, in terms of all this, one of the things that I am a little concerned about is something I hear from many people that the generations have changed and everyone is looking for 3 minute bite sized chunks of information that they can embrace. There is a place for that, but you cannot develop expertise based on 3 minute chunks of information online. Uh, you need to be in the OR. You need to understand the science, the pathophysiology, the course of disease, and all that, which is a given. That's what we've all been trained to do. But we cannot forget that while we look at chunking information. Yes, chunking of information, point of care information provides the personalized education that we are talking about. So that we need to add on to what we are doing, but it cannot take the place of that foundation. And there will need to be a mix of one type or the other. Now, when you look at AI as a whole, every couple of weeks, there's a huge advance in the use of AI in education, whether it is writing multiple choice questions, grading them, searching for information, even writing OSCE stations and grading OSCE stations, all that is being done as we speak using AI. And we need to embrace that. But I honestly believe that as far as we can see, now we may not see everything right now, AI is not going to replace us as surgeon teachers and surgeon educators. It'll be a great adjunct. It can personalize education based on practice needs and other needs assessments and gap analyses. It can reinforce certain things, and it can certainly make life easier. Instead of having to do all the research and come up with all the information ourselves, we can say, put a prompt into Chat GPT and see what comes out and then work from there. But we have to be sure that there's a human involved, at least for now, that is looking at some of this. I believe the big area that is not getting enough attention in some circles, it's getting attention in some other circles, in certain societies, but not in quite a few of our circles, is the use of AI in the OR, the computer vision. the
Mhm.
guidance when people are operating, helping people stay out of trouble. I think we're going to see all of that. And we have to embrace AI and look at the whole spectrum of opportunities that exist and then see what is applicable now and what might be applicable a couple of years down the line.
Great. I want to finish with two questions. One is, what's next for you as the transition in the senior vice president role occurs, and what's next for you? In Want to at the end finish with any final um, comments and advice you have for surgical educators on the line and people who will be watching this potentially over the next few years. But first, let me ask, what's next for you?
Uh, for me, Mo, I will be the Senior Vice President for Education through the end of October, through the Clinical Congress that's coming up, and then wrapping up all those pieces. And then I'm going to be handing over the baton to Dr. Carla Terhune, who is on board part time as we speak. And beyond that, from November 1 through the end of September of 2026, I will be serving as Senior Vice President for the Academy, which will allow me to spend more time on the Academy to move some of the programs forward with gusto and with greater speed, because that would be my principal focus. And then once I'm done with that, then my engagement with the college on staff will be done. Of course, I'll always remain a fellow of the college. I'm very
Of course.
proud of that, and it is something that I cherish. But as a staff, I'll be done. And then I have told our division staff when I made the announcement in December about my plans that I'm not going to be lying on the beach every day contemplating something or the other with a tall drink in my hand with an umbrella in it. I might do that once in a while, but I want to remain involved in surgical education and leadership in advancing the cause of surgical educators. And I haven't quite figured out what that will look like because I haven't had the time. I've just been trying to get a lot of stuff done. But the next couple of months will allow me to think through that a little more. And I'm hoping to balance my professional and personal lives such that the two are integrated appropriately. And I'm certainly spending less time at work than I do right now. So that is a definite goal. And then your question about advice
Just
to
any final words for surgical educators and
sure.
surgeons as you.
Um, I've got to tell everyone who's on this call and whoever might, access the recorded material. If you have it in your blood, in your genes, in your heart to teach and to make a difference over the long term, go into surgical education. Right now, there is a career path. You can, at one point there wasn't. When I got started, there was no career path. Now there's a career path. You can become a professor, you can become a department chair, you can become a dean, you can even become a university president, whatever you want with education. If you want to be an educator in the community, you can still do that. So there are plenty of opportunities ahead. Now there are pathways for all that. In our generation, all the people who were in my cohort in the Association for Surgical Education, we had to create those pathways. Now they exist. So aware of them, ask for the right mentors to support you, and the best is ahead of you. And I will share with you something that I've often contemplated when I was working day in and day out as a busy clinician, teaching, of course, and doing some research and education. At that time, I was making a difference with patients and their families, one patient at a time, which was huge to me. In fact, my patients even wrote to me when I came here during the holidays and all with nice cards and stuff, remembering our time together. But when you educate someone, you educate them for the next several generations. It's a ripple effect. It's the most gratifying thing. Surgery is very gratifying, as is education. If you combine the two, you have a winning ticket.
On that note, thank you so much. That's an amazing statement. As such, I see some distinguished names on the in the list of participants, and I think that maybe I'll try to speak for many who are on this line, who are not on this line. You have touched many of our lives as surgical educators. I know you've touched mine, and you have given opportunities to many to flourish. And really, I think just the stories, the career that you've had, I think is humongously impactful. And just it's such an honor tonight to be able to have this conversation with you. I know I've been looking forward to it for a long time. And thank you for everything you've done for surgical education and for many of us who consider ourselves surgical educators.
Thank you so much. It's been a privilege and a real honor for me. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our attendees. Appreciate you spending the night with us, and appreciate everyone. Thank you, Caroline and Kate and Patrice for everything. Have a great night, everyone.